everyone for being here today. Thank you to the Portuguese Cultural Center, to the Brookfield and Danbury League of Women Voters for doing all the work necessary to put this together. It was nice when I walked in as an Irish politician. I'm especially comfortable in a debate with a bar. So I think things will go well. Why is this country and this district crying out for change today? It's palpable. As I go door to door throughout this district, you can feel it. People want something new. And why is that? People are looking at a healthcare system that's hemorrhaging at the seams, costing too much and leaving far too many people behind. Middle-class families throughout this district are being squeezed by education costs, by rising taxes, by rising energy costs. And you look at a Congress that seems more intent on giving more to those who need no more. They see a war in Iraq that is spiraling out of control, getting more violent by the day. And they watch a Republican Congress seemingly content to rubber stamp the policies of this president. And they see increasing, almost daily revelations about the growing ethical and moral lapses of this Congress, and no willingness on behalf of the Congress to get their own ship in order. Now, Congresswoman Johnson, over the course of the next hour, will give you a list, sometimes unending it seems, of accomplishments and grants and bills that she's offered and voted for, and that's to be expected after 24 years. I hope the question that you ask yourself throughout this next hour, and frankly throughout the next 2 weeks, is simply this: has it made a difference? Are things better because of it? Is our healthcare system better for working families and for small businesses? Is the middle class getting more opportunity, not less opportunity? Is the situation on the ground in Iraq getting better, not worse? And are we doing anything to reduce the growing corruption in Washington? The answer, I think, to all those questions is no, that none of those are getting better, which leads to the central question here: do we need change? I think we absolutely do. And I hope that you'll also have the courage over the next 2 weeks and over the course of tonight to look past the character assassinations and the 30-second spots and to hopefully see who I am, because I'm proud of my record in 8 years in the state legislature. I'm proud of being part of a state legislature and a state senate that puts politics behind and issues first, that has passed stem cell research, that has moved us forward on prescription drug price control, that has cut taxes for the middle class, and has increased protections not only for our environment, but for many of our most vulnerable citizens around us. I think that this election is about change, and I hope over the course of the next hour you see a vision by which we can all, together, make this country better. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be with you tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Portuguese Cultural Center for sponsoring this debate. But I want to thank you all for coming, because politics matters in our lives. Government matters in our lives. Public service matters in our lives. And it has been a great privilege to serve Danbury and the surrounding towns in the last few years since I became your Congresswoman in 2002. And I have served you not just by going door to door during campaigns, which I've always done, but by circulating in your community, in your schools, in your senior citizen centers, in your hospitals, in your community health center, in your factories. Worked with your mayor to make sure that a Las Vegas-style casino didn't come to Danbury. Worked with your firefighters to get a $350,000 grant. Working with Candlewood Lake to make sure that Candlewood Lake is preserved for all of us and the people around it aren't laden with fees. Working with your senior center to get a $3.2 million HUD grant to help build it. Working with your police to stop the terrible threat to our children of sex predators on the internet. Working with the transportation people to get better exits and exit ramps for Danbury residents and those who commute in this area. Working hard with the mayor and everyone interested to keep the Taxpayers Assistance Office open right here in Danbury. And yes, working with the Land Trust to try to preserve all that land around the prison as open space. And working with the law to make sure that we have better tools to preserve open space, passing just recently a new tax provision that makes it easier for small landowners to donate land for preservation. Working with the tax code in Washington to make sure that the middle class get their taxes cut, and that those earning the lowest salaries get the biggest tax cut, dropping their bracket to 10%, giving them tax credits for their children, eliminating the marriage penalty, lowering the burden on Connecticut citizens because we're the highest taxed people in the country. And yes, working with your hospitals on all kinds of things that make sure they get reimbursed fairly and equitably so they can be strong facilities for your community, and bringing to your seniors a benefit of prescription drugs, a tremendous benefit, a program that's working, a program that will get better and better each year. I'm proud of the work I've done in Danbury, even to helping to bring the 2 blue locomotives to your railroad museum, and working with everyone in this community, but particularly the TRIO students at WestConn and in between, who are working to have the opportunity, the first in their generation, to go to college. So I'm here in your community, I'm present, I work with you because I believe public service is helping you realize your vision of hope for your community and working with me on national policies which help us all.
Thank you again. If I could ask you to hold your applause until the closing remarks of the candidates. We'll now go to questions from the panelists, and we'll start off on the outside with Scott Benjamin of the Brookfield Journal. Scott.
For Congresswoman Johnson, how would you achieve universal health care over the next 2 years?
Well, I have been working with the cities in my district using what we call HRSA grants to be able to reach out and cover the homeless. Remember, I'm the one that introduced the federal legislation that covered all children in America with health insurance, and in Connecticut is called Husky. And I've enriched the senior program called Medicare with the first preventive benefits under the Republicans and prescription drugs now. But that's not all. We have also put into Medicare a chronic disease management plan that will help seniors who suffer from chronic illnesses to have far better preventive and holistic care. So we've set the pattern of enriching benefits in a way that improve quality, but will reduce costs because they will reduce usage of hospitals and emergency rooms. And if we can get the uninsured into the system, as we will through these HRSA grants, and into electronic health records, we will learn what we need to do from the federal level to make sure that all Americans have access to affordable health insurance that is funded honestly and does truly give them a choice of doctor. Medicaid is no longer funded honestly by the state. It doesn't give you a choice of doctor because it pays so little that very few doctors participate. As chairman of the Health Committee, he could have taken that on. As chairman of the committee that governs Medicare, I have taken on the payment issues to make sure people get paid fairly and equitably, but I'm swinging the whole plan around to a preventive, holistic, supportive kind of plan that will improve quality and save money. And when we do national health care, we need to put in place that kind of holistic, preventive health care system for everyone.
Chris Murphy.
Thank you. You know, what's lost in government today, I think, is this old word called accountability. And there's got to be some accountability in this Congress for where our healthcare system has gone. It's well and good to talk about, 17 different proposals, which maybe in the end get us somewhere close to insuring more people. But let's be honest, the number of uninsured are going in only one direction. We aren't getting closer to universal health care coverage on any single day. Every day we get farther away. And why is that? Because this Congress has put profits before people. And the Medicare prescription drug benefit is a perfect example of it. Congresswoman Johnson certainly rightly takes credit for writing that bill. But what it did was basically do everything that the insurance companies and drug companies wanted. In the end, costing us 3 times more than it was initially estimated to cost. Now estimated to cost $1.2 trillion from the original $400 billion. Why aren't we getting closer to universal health care coverage, despite the fact that we are paying exponentially more in this country than other countries for health care? Because our health care system is designed to help the people who are making money on it, not the people who should be benefiting from it, patients. And Congresswoman Johnson has a lot to answer for during her time as chairwoman of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Health. She's had an opportunity to start righting the ship. But by every indicator, by every measure, our healthcare system is getting worse. Less businesses able to offer insurance to their employees, more people uninsured, and costs rising. I'm committed to a system of universal coverage that uses the bulk purchasing power of the federal government to achieve those savings, that starts to pool resources to allow small businesses to buy in to some of the big federal programs, and first decides to put patients and their well-being ahead of the profits of the industries that are now making out far too well off of this system.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Fred Lucas of the News Times.
This is for Mr. Murphy. You pointed out the problems with the Republican-controlled Congress. But I wanted to ask you, if the Democrats weren't in control of Congress, the Ways and Means chairman would be Charlie Rangel, who has said he would support increasing taxes. The Judiciary chairman would be John Conyers, who's already written a resolution to impeach the president, which would not exactly change the tone. My question is, why would Washington be better with Democrats in control?
Well, you know, I actually heard Charlie Rangel speak the other day, and he said something I thought that was pretty prophetic. He said that if the Democrats take back control of the Congress, they can either govern or get even. They can't do both. And his intention is to govern. And I believe that that's the intention of the Democratic leaders, is to actually start making up ground that we have lost over the past few years. Just take a look at the Democratic leadership proposal. The first thing that they would offer if the Democrats took back control of the House is to open up the rules of the House, to allow for more debate, for more amendments, for more public hearing, even on Republican bills. This has got to be a central part of governing. The Medicare bill that we just talked about that was passed by Congress was passed not only in the dead of night, but was passed while not allowing any of the Democratic proposals to come onto the table. But why have we succeeded in moving forward on stem cell research and drug importation here in the state of Connecticut while Congress has failed? Because we do things together. Because we put aside partisan differences. That doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. today. It doesn't. And I truly believe that the Democrats, should they take control, will live up to their word and that they will concentrate on governing rather than getting even. That's a lot of the reason I'm going down there. Listen, why did I run for office at such a young age? In part because my generation had just become utterly turned off by politics. They thought that what mattered more was whether you could score political points against each other instead of actually getting things done. I'm going down there to be part of the solution, not to be part of this increasing partisan bickering, which has turned so many people off from politics.
Nancy?
Well, first I would like to mention, since you mentioned accountability, you should be held accountable for the fact that you voted to throw 23,000 parents off of Husky. And because you cut the outreach money so badly for Husky, and this isn't me, this is the Voices for Children, I think, report, 18,000 children were lost from Husky. So you've not exactly been careful about maintaining coverage under the state programs. And as I say, Medicaid pays so little, a lot of people on the state programs can't see the doctor of their choice. And what would be different in Washington is very clear and simple. Charlie Rangel has said over and over again, he can't think of a single tax cut the Republicans passed that he would want to make permanent. No 10% bracket, that would go back up to 15%. No tax credit for children, now up to $1,000 per child. No elimination of the marriage penalty. Those three things together made a huge difference. The tax increase that you supported at the state level started with hitting people at $22,500. Now, we relieved taxes on the lowest level of earnings, and that helped all people. And then it was the biggest middle-class tax cut we passed since the Reagan tax cut, and basically just took us back to the Reagan brackets. Nothing actually radical. It just enabled people to have the money they need to save for their children's college education, to save for their retirement. And at the same time, we actually passed through the tax code a lot of incentives to make it easier to save for your college education, and we increased the number of Pell Grants and the amount of the Pell Grants to make it easier to go to college and not have a lot of debt. And we started a whole new SMART grant program. So we've done a lot to help middle-class families have the disposable income they need to raise their families, and Charlie Rangel will wipe it all out.
Our next question will come from Jillian Morrow of station WLAE.
This question is for Congresswoman Johnson. Last week, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was talking to a Air Force college in Alabama and said Iraq has not been on, quote, a steady, smooth glide path. When the president rearranged his staff, why didn't he rearrange Secretary of Defense, and why hasn't anyone called for Rumsfeld to resign?
Well, directly to that point, because I think it would be destabilizing to facing the complex problems in Iraq, which are extremely important to our future and important to the future of world peace and the effort by the community of nations to turn back the power of terrorist networks. Also, Rumsfeld has done some important work on reorganizing the forces, creating the special forces, changing the way we manage conflict, and for that he's earned the enmity of some of the established brass, but we have a ways to go. So I don't want him to be the issue. The real issue is, what do we do about Iraq? And what we do about Iraq is to put a great deal more pressure on the government to stand up their forces and their police and their government. They're the ones that have to take control of the sectarian violence that is killing so many and is a daily tragedy in our lives and theirs. They can do that. We have to motivate them to do that. We have to help them find new strategies to do that. And you see that going on right now. You also are probably aware of the Baker-Hamilton Commission that will again bring new ideas onto the table since the current ones are not doing well. And I think the next step is to bring the nations of the Arab world, of the Middle East, in on the issue of how do we create stability. Ultimately, if all else fails, we'll have to go to a looser federalist system that allows each region to have more autonomy. Because after all, the Kurds have a thriving economy, and they don't have terrorism, and they're Iraqis. So it can be done. We have to help it happen. The one thing we can't allow to happen is we cannot allow Iraq to become a training ground for Al-Qaeda, and the Iraqi economy to become a money pot for Al-Qaeda. That would be catastrophic. We can prevent that from happening. That's our job to prevent that from happening.
Crystal.
Thank you. You know, I've heard Congressman Johnson say a couple times that removing Rumsfeld would be detrimental because it would destabilize things. Well, you know, we need to do something to destabilize Bush's strategy in Iraq. We need to do it pretty quickly. This idea that the strategy going forward should be putting more pressure on the government, I mean, that's just sort of a little bit longer way of saying we should stay the course, because that's what this administration and members of Congress have been saying for years. More pressure on the government to take control of their own future. More control, more pressure on the government. You say that enough times, you hope that maybe it comes true, and yet things get worse by the day on the ground in Iraq. The truth of the situation is that, as so many Republicans and Democrats are realizing, the Iraqis are not going to stand up for themselves until they have some sense of when that time is going to be. Now, I don't think you set that timetable in the course of a political debate, but I think that that's the conversation that should be occurring. And the last thing to say is this. The cat's already out of the bag when it comes to Iraq being a training ground for terrorists throughout this world. And that's not me saying it. That's the 16 most respected intelligence agencies in this country have said it. That this has become what they call the cause célèbre for the terrorist movement around the world. It's too late, and we in part have created that breeding ground and that training ground for terrorists by our actions there and by our very poor decision to not put enough resources and troops into that country when we first made the decision to go in. So a new Congress has to hold this president accountable. I mean, that's what it comes back to. This Congress has abdicated its responsibility to check this president on Iraq. And you better believe that I will be part of a Congress that will start to set a new course.
Scott Benjamin.
Or Mr. Murphy, do you support a ban on lobbyist paid travel for members of Congress?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I absolutely support a ban on lobbyist paid travel, and I go further than that, frankly. I support also comprehensive campaign finance reform that would get lobbyists and special interest money completely out of congressional elections. I think that the cozy relationships that get created through those contributions and through that travel, which Congresswoman Johnson has been one of the chief beneficiaries of in this Congress, is detrimental to our process. Is very detrimental to our process. The first bill that I introduced in the state legislature was a bill, amongst the first bills I introduced, was to publicly finance campaigns. And I'll tell you, it was one of the proudest moments of my time in the state legislature when I got to vote in favor of that. And if you read the New York Times this weekend, you saw that it was one of the reasons that they decided for the first time to endorse a candidate against Congresswoman Johnson. So let's get serious. Let's get serious about lobbying reform. Let's get serious about campaign finance reform. I don't think there are quid pro quos necessarily happening in Washington, except with the worst of them. But I think that the connection forged between Congresswoman Johnson and the drug industry and the insurance industry, and the relationship that was built over years of spending time in fundraisers together, is in part why we got such a miserable prescription drug bill. We should have done prescription drugs as part of Medicare a long time ago, but we should get it right now that we've done it.
Nancy Johnson.
I voted for, worked hard for the campaign finance reform bill that passed the Congress. You can see it wasn't perfect because we're an entrepreneurial, creative society, and frankly, there's greater chaos out there and greater dishonesty out there in the campaign process now, but with all the groups out there, unaccountable to anyone, than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Now, this issue of travel, very few trips that I've gone on have had any lobbyist money paying for them. They're mostly sponsored by the Aspen Institute or committee travel. I went to Iraq last August with some of the members from the Armed Services Committee. Very important to go and see. It helped me a lot to ask our boys, how is it you're pressing this issue of standing the Iraqis up? What does it mean, the rhetoric up here versus your work on the ground? And they told me. And one of them said, it's a blank piece of paper. What do you mean, I said? He said, look, if they don't take over, you just come in one day and you don't have the plan. And they then have to sit there and say, well, let's see, the plan should be this or that. And they learn to plan. And he described to me how much they've learned about planning the day's activities, the goals and objectives, and the logistical supply lines. You've got to do that at the bottom before you can expect the system to work from the top. Now, we're not there yet. It's not perfect. Big mistakes were made. But if you don't do some of this travel, you don't know. I'm glad I went to the Middle East on a trade mission to see the progress the Europeans were making against us on scrawny little trade agreements that actually keep our products out. Our trade agreements keep our products in large new markets, and particularly are good for American manufacturing. So I traveled to learn. I don't believe in being a congresswoman for global power and being an ignorant member of that community.